I was reading a bunch of studies that show that adoption rates from non-standard families, like gay couples and stuff like that, the children that they're adopting, the children themselves came from Christian parents who then put the children up for adoption.
Hey, what is going on, everybody? Genuinely pumped you are here for this one because it turned into something I was not expecting at all. So what we have today is Craig McElveen, a secular humanist debater known for his work challenging religious claims, going up against Luigi, a Christian apologist, on Modern Day Debate hosted by Dr. James Coons. The topic is whether Christianity or secular humanism has the better foundation for ethics. Craig comes in without his slides because he is literally in the middle of moving house, and Luigi comes fully prepared with a presentation. And somehow, Craig still manages to completely flip the debate on its head by the end of the cross-examination. Stick around all the way to the final section, because there is a moment toward the end of this clip where one side drops a statistic the other side simply cannot respond to. And the reason they cannot respond is honestly something I have never seen happen in a debate before. Before we get into it, drop a comment right now and tell me where you are watching from. Seriously, I read every single one, and the locations people watch from always surprise me. So let me know your city or country. All right, let us get into it.
Luigi.
Hey, thank you very much. Appreciate that, Luigi. It's nice someone to actually come with a presentation and stuff. I apologize that I didn't this time because of my issues. Okay, so you started with saying that basically, how do we know what's moral if we're just a collection of atoms, and everything is just by an accident? Could you tell me why, even if we are, or why you think, even if we are just a collection of atoms and that's an accident, why that would be something that is incapable of then developing morals and ethics? You didn't really explain why that negates the possibility of morals and ethics becoming a thing.
It becomes completely reliant on just human inclination, which is the result of simply an accidental process that can't be trusted. So, like, I brought up several examples where to a child, their inclination is that needle is harming them, but it's a life-saving vaccine. So should we trust our feelings or should we not trust our feelings?
Well, it's not just all about feelings, it's about what is going to help humanity thrive. And I could counter that with the fact that I go to the gym 5 days a week and it hurts me every single time. But I know it's for the greater good of improving my overall fitness and health. And the secular humanism is about reducing overall harm. A vaccine might hurt because it stabs you, but it's going to give you a better chance to go on in the future and be better. But then when you're able to make your own decisions, you don't have to get a vaccine, and no one's going to force it.
We have to use a code word instead of that word that starts with a V.
Right.
We have to use serum.
Sorry.
Serum.
That was me who brought it up. I'll take the bullet on that one.
No, you're right. My bad. I talk about I do try and forget saying that word. Yes. So all right. But then you made you did the same thing that Andrew did when I spoke to him, and you said, well, what if we take someone and experiment on them to help everybody else? You do realize that goes against one of the tenets of secular humanism, which is about personal autonomy. So it'd be something that secular humanists wouldn't do. We wouldn't take people prisoner to experiment on them.
Couldn't you make an argument that could be applied? Doesn't a child have personal autonomy to decide whether or not they want to receive a vaccine?
No, a child doesn't have the personal autonomy because they don't have the cognitive functions to have that personal autonomy. They don't know what is good or not for them. However, once an adult is an adult, they can make those decisions for themselves. As parents, we take on the responsibility of our children's health until they are capable of doing that themselves. The child doesn't have the cognitive functions to decide if that is good or not.
I understand that there's an answer to it. What I'm saying is these are ambiguous answers that are a result of an accidental process. So what I'm trying to expose is how ambiguous it is.
But why is ambiguity a bad thing when there's so many people and so many things to consider? There's no one overreaching voice saying this is what you do. It is humanity getting together and seeing what has happened to us and what we can learn from that to then be better in the future.
But better is itself a value statement. That is itself a value statement. So like, what do you mean by better? Because you said
to be able to thrive more, to be able to to be able to be in a position where you can increase birth rates when it is appropriate, when there is enough resources and things like that. Secular humanism is about humanity thriving, and the thing that you put forward in your intro was about taking away that thriving ability and saying, well, that's also secular humanism because it goes against what religion says. You kind of miss the point of secular humanism being about making humanity, giving it the ability to thrive in the best way that it can.
This is where the debate gets genuinely interesting, because Luigi walks in with a prepared presentation and immediately goes for what he thinks is the kill shot. The idea that secular humanism cannot justify morality because humans are just the result of an accidental process. And on the surface, that sounds like a strong philosophical challenge, but Craig does not flinch for even a second. You have to understand what Luigi is actually trying to do here. He is not just asking a question. He is trying to plant a seed of doubt about whether secular ethics can even be trusted at all. Luigi said this: it becomes completely reliant on just human inclination, which is the result of simply an accidental process that can't be trusted. That is a C.S. Lewis-style argument dressed up as a cross-examination question. And it sounds smart until you actually think about what it is really saying. Because here is what people miss about this exchange. The argument that an accidental origin makes something untrustworthy would also apply to Christian moral intuitions. If God created humans through a process that resulted in those same feelings and intuitions, then you are still ultimately trusting the product of that process. The difference is just whether you put a divine label on it or not. Craig responds immediately, and the response is clean. Craig said this: it is not just all about feelings, it is about what is going to help humanity thrive. The gym analogy he uses is actually more philosophically powerful than it first sounds. It shows that secular humanism does not just operate on what feels good in the moment. It operates on what produces better outcomes over time, which is a completely coherent moral framework that requires zero supernatural grounding. And then Luigi tries to set a trap with the medical experiment scenario. What if experimenting on someone without consent would save everyone else? This is supposed to expose secular humanism as having no consistent boundary, but Craig shuts it down instantly. Craig said this: you do realize that goes against one of the tenets of secular humanism, which is about personal autonomy. That is not an evasion. That is a precise answer. The trap fails because Craig knows the framework he is defending better than Luigi anticipated. Then when Luigi pushes on ambiguity being a weakness, Craig flips it entirely. And Craig said this: why is ambiguity a bad thing when there are so many people and so many things to consider? It is humanity getting together and seeing what has happened to us and what we can learn from that to then be better in the future. That reframe is significant because it repositions what Luigi called a weakness as actually being the strength of a system that adapts and learns rather than being locked into ancient fixed rules.
Without having to rely on one voice from a deity that possibly doesn't exist.
But I don't know what thrive means, because now you're saying that the experiments, that's actually against a tenet of secular humanism, but it would result in quote unquote thriving because it would save the masses from dying from this pandemic. So I don't know what you mean by thrive.
But that's why there's the tenets there. That's why there's the guidance of, yes, we want humanity to be able to advance and, people be, thrive, people be more happy, be more healthy. We all know what thrive means. We don't need to get bogged down in semantics of what words means. But we can't do that. We're taking away people's personal autonomy, which is one of the tenets of secular humanism. So we can't do that. We're not going to try and say, oh, well, this could be better at the, that person's harm. Would take away that one person's autonomy to make sure everyone else is better. That goes against the tenets of secular humanism.
Okay, I mean, this is your cross-exam, so I don't want to push too much on these arguments. So,
right. Okay. So the other thing you went on to really was about the Christian about birth rates, right? And here's the thing: no one's going to disagree that secular countries overall, the countries that are more secular, because there's no secular governments, there's no Christian governments, it's governments elected by people, whatever, or dictators. But the countries that are more secular do tend to have, at the moment, lower birth rates. Are you aware of any of the things that are in place to change that, is my question? Because it's something that you and a lot of other Christians bring up as something against secular humanism. And although I can agree that that is the case, are you aware of the measures in place to try and change that?
well, there's currently, that's the issue, is that it's going down at an increasing rate. So from 2019 to 2024, it's gone from 1.70 to 1.43. So whatever we're doing isn't working.
Yeah, that's why there's more things in more recent times. Like if you look at secular countries like Japan and France, trying to put forward a 4-day week work, so a 4-day week work, so that there's more time at home to make babies. There's a lot of countries that are literally secular countries like Scandinavia and stuff that are now literally throwing money at parents to have more children, because they have taken note that the birth rate has fallen, and even more significantly over more recent years. So the past 2 to 3 years since COVID has moved away, there's been a lot of work within a lot of the secular countries to try and increase the birth rate in natural ways by making more time for couples to be together, giving tax breaks to couples, saying that if you have more babies, we will give you more money to look after them, making childcare easier.
Here is where Luigi starts to show the cracks in his preparation, because after Craig handles the autonomy and ambiguity arguments, Luigi tries to pivot back to the pandemic experiment and reframe it as a thrive question. But watch what happens. Luigi said this: I don't know what thrive means, because you're now saying that the experiments are against a tenet of secular humanism, but it would result in thriving because it would save the masses. That is actually a reasonable philosophical pressure point. But the problem is Luigi is trying to exploit a genuine philosophical tension while simultaneously refusing to defend his own framework to the same standard. Craig does not get rattled. Craig said this: we can't do that. We are not going to say, oh, well, this could be better at the expense of that one person's autonomy. That goes against the tenets of secular humanism. The answer is clear. The framework has a hierarchy. Autonomy sits above utilitarian calculation in secular humanist ethics. That is not ambiguity. That is a principle. And Luigi cannot break it. And this is the part that I think is genuinely educational for anyone watching this debate. Secular humanism as a philosophical tradition has been formally developed since at least the early 20th century through thinkers like John Dewey, and later through the humanist manifestos of 1933 and 1973. It has always had personal autonomy as a non-negotiable foundation. So when Luigi suggests the framework is vague and cannot handle hard cases, he is actually just revealing that he has not engaged deeply enough with what secular humanism actually says. Then the conversation shifts to birth rates, and this is the moment Craig was clearly waiting for. Craig said this: are you aware of any of the things that are in place to change that? And when Luigi starts to respond, Craig walks straight through his argument with specific real-world examples. Craig said this: There are literally secular countries like Scandinavia and stuff that are now literally throwing money at parents to have more children because they have taken note that the birth rate has fallen. Japan implementing a 4-day work week specifically to increase family time. France providing financial incentives for larger families. Germany expanding paid parental leave. This is the part that blows my mind. Luigi built a significant portion of his entire opening statement around birth rate decline as proof that secular humanism cannot sustain a society. And Craig just casually dismantles it by pointing out that secular governments are already actively responding to that exact problem. The information was publicly available. Luigi just had not looked.
The fact that you keep going back to you, not just you, but other Christians, you keep going back to the birth rate thing, it means that you haven't really looked into what is happening now in the secular countries.
Well, you brought up in your debate with Jim Bob that if a man wanted to leave his family, because that was what was going to make him happy, that under the secular humanist framework, there was nothing wrong with that. So if people are just having children because they like the idea of having a kid and not for the sake of future society, then that itself is problematic.
I didn't say that though. My point was that secular countries are putting in place measures for couples to have more babies and to have more time for couples to be in place, and there is tax breaks for being married and having a family and allowing that to be a thing. But at the same time, secular humanists allow for things like adoption. And non-standard families that deal with the people that don't want the babies, which studies show the majority of children that end up being orphaned actually come from Christian parents. So how do you feel about that?
That what studies say? What that they come from?
Studies show that more of the orphan children come from Christian or religious families.
What studies say that? Studies in Canada?
I don't have my notes with me. I wanted to present a bunch of this, but I was reading a bunch of studies that show that adoption rates from non-standard families, like gay couples and stuff like that, the children that they're adopting, the children themselves came from Christian parents who then put the children up for adoption for whatever reason. And that seemed to be the higher amount of children up for adoption was from Christian or religious families.
I mean, I presented several quotes from secular scholars that say the opposite about Christians and their
secular scholars versus actual studies.
No, they're citing studies. They're citing studies in the quotes. They're talking about study. What's that?
When were these from?
These were from.
I'm citing like well. I wish I had my stuff with me instead of packing it away. But the things that I've been looking at are the recent years, the past 2 to 5 years. The majority of orphaned children come from religious families, and then picked up by non-religious and non-standard families. So
I don't think that's true. But regardless, like I pointed out at the end of my opening statement. Like there's bad Christians who do bad things. So that doesn't disprove Christian ethics.
And then right at the end of this exchange, Craig drops something that I genuinely did not see coming. And I do not think Luigi saw it coming either. Craig had been pushing back on the birth rate argument, and Luigi tries to pivot by bringing up adoption and non-standard families as a counterpoint. And that is when Craig fires back with a statistic that changes the entire direction of the conversation. Craig said this: studies show the majority of children that end up being orphaned actually come from Christian parents. So how do you feel about that? That line lands like a grenade, because Luigi had just been using family stability and child welfare as implicit evidence that Christianity produces better social outcomes. And Craig is now flipping that exact argument back against him, using the very population of vulnerable children Luigi implied secular humanism fails to protect. What happens next is one of the most revealing moments in the entire debate. Luigi said this: I don't have my notes with me. I wanted to present a bunch of this. He left his research at home because he was in the middle of moving. And Craig immediately picks up on it. Craig said this. I was reading a bunch of studies that show that adoption rates from non-standard families, the children that they are adopting came from Christian parents who then put the children up for adoption. And here is what I find genuinely fascinating about this moment. It is not just that Luigi cannot counter the statistic, it is that Luigi admits the evidence exists and that he had read it recently. He just literally packed it away in a moving box. That detail matters because it tells you that Craig had done the research. Craig came prepared on a point that Luigi apparently thought was safe territory for the Christian side of the argument. Luigi finally falls back on a line he used in his own opening statement, that bad Christians doing bad things does not disprove Christian ethics. And that is true. But notice what just happened. Craig just spent this entire segment defending secular humanism against every attack Luigi prepared, and then landed a counterargument in territory Luigi thought was his strongest ground. The research was there. Luigi just did not have it with him. So what do you guys think of this? Leave your thoughts down in the comments. Please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.